Hey, podcast listeners. On today's episode of the Advice First podcast, we get time with Christian Moore. Christian's a co-founder of MaxPro Insurance Solutions out here in Southern California, and they specialize in commercial insurance like workers' comp, general liability, but not your average insurance policies. And this is where it got really interesting. Their specialty is in those hard to place or complex industries. Now, what's most impressive is hearing what drove Christian down this path, enough for him to leave a major financial institution at a very young age and join his partner to start MaxPro, and the priority that they've put behind building systems within their business. Now, Christian is a phenomenal young professional, as you will soon find out, and there's some huge takeaways in what he had to share. I hope you enjoy. Welcome to the Advice First podcast. Welcome to another episode of the Advice First podcast. This is your host, Robert Clark. Today I am joined by a phenomenal guest I'm extremely excited to have in studio. This could be a way longer episode than what we're about to make it. But, as you'll find out, Christian's got quite a family at home. And so between one of those 600 kids, there's always something going on. Today I have with me a fine guest, Mr. Christian Moore. Christian, how are you?
Great. Thank you, Robert. I'm very excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you here.
Awesome.
Christian is a co-founder and co-CEO of a firm called MaxPro Insurance. Now, anytime we say that fantastic four-letter word, insurance, I know everyone's just gets super excited about a fun-filled and fun, jam-packed podcast episode. But the reason we have Christian sitting here in the studio is because, co-founder, co-CEO, it's not just like an Instagram business title. It's like every time I talk to you, Christian, I am blown away by how you've decided to run your business and really be in the trenches with it.
For sure.
All the while kind of refining it. And that's something we'll get into. But even before MaxPro was around, you were in the finance industry, right?
Correct.
Talk to me a little bit about, your experience and your roles before MaxPro was a thing.
For sure. So it's been definitely an evolution, and my progression toward where I'm at now was, I think, as it is for many people during a career path, a process of self-discovery. What my particular gifts and interests and talents are and are not. Mm-hmm. I think sometimes knowing what you're not particularly good at is more important even than knowing what you're good at.
Yep.
And so I started in banking back with Wells Fargo, right in the epicenter and the heat of the whole scandal-ridden era, where I was I received a lot of that sales pressure that they became infamous for, and sort of found creative ways to put up numbers that were accurate, that they wouldn't come after me for, by focusing on educating people on credit and selling credit cards, but educating people so that they knew what they were doing. It was legitimate. And the thing with credit cards is you can't issue one without a signature. Everything is much more dialed in, right. Whereas the regular bank accounts, they'll open the account without a signature. Then they'll come back and ask for it later. And it's like, we have like hundreds, thousands of missing signatures all across the, well, it's because they're opening them without talking to people.
Oh my gosh.
So there was sort of a creativity on how to, hold that ground or do something that I felt was productive, at least in a very unproductive, very kind of uncomfortable environment.
Yeah.
But what that did was give me a little bit of a distaste for that corporate environment where you don't feel like you have a whole lot of control, even to do good things, even to do good by clients or customers. And I wanted to find other platforms where I had a little bit more ability to use my interest in helping, my sort of obsessive mind about learning ways to educate people. And so it moved me to, I eventually went to Prudential, where I got more into the life insurance side.
Yep.
Then I went to Morgan Stanley.
Yep.
I was there for a couple of years. That's where I met Fred.
Yep.
who's here now.
Yeah.
And then I went to JP Morgan.
Yeah.
And more of the bank. So I got a kind of a tour of the different models.
No kidding. Yeah. You took the long way out.
Yeah. But and I was sort of moving toward out that whole time.
Yep. As
you just kind of indicated, partly because I'm realizing more about myself. I'm more of a macro systems thinker. Mm-hmm. And as much as I like information, I'm not as good at the on-demand right here. I'm delivering the product right here or the advice. Yep. I'm more like, let's build a system and get a bunch of other people able to really, deliver fantastic results in their space.
Yep.
And let's help manage a bigger ecosystem.
Which is actually kind of a gift because, so many people are self-employed right now and just maxed out at delivering those, mm-hmm. over and over and over again. Mm-hmm. And they don't know how to do that one thing called scaling.
Yeah.
And scaling all comes from systems. So you kind of look at it as like, you get so kind of hung up on that, delivering that one on-demand situation. Mm-hmm. that you're like, no, I don't even want to do it unless it could be a repeatable thing.
Yeah, it's really a matter of physics.
Yep.
There's only so much time. I mean, time and space all sort of fall into that, world of physics, and one person only has so much time, attention, energy to expend. And so the idea, scaling can come from, it's important to distinguish, there's two different ways where scaling can come from. If you really look at it from a unrefined perspective, one is like you just injection of capital. You can just like hyperscale, which Silicon Valley calls blitz scaling. Mm-hmm. Hoffman, the founder of LinkedIn, writes about it. Or you can grow the slow way, mm-hmm. but arguably the more sustainable way, where you do focus on systems and you put things in place that are based on the objective of doing things the right way all the time and always taking care of not only your end user, but also everyone who's involved in the process.
Yep.
So you got to take care of employees and you got to take care of the clients.
Right.
Or else you don't have a great business. Something's going to be missing.
Yep.
And then being able to scale that so that the quality assurance and the ability of everyone to actually deliver on that and to sort of live the lifestyle of doing that can be expanded as a size and scope of the company expands.
Yep, absolutely.
And I don't have a huge company, so that's all in the work in progress. I have an idea that I know how to get there, but I'm in the trenches in the process right now.
Aren't we all? I mean, wouldn't you just love to have $3 billion of capital or seed funding to just throw at scaling and
yeah, as long as it doesn't take all my ownership away, that's the only problem with it. So yeah,
that's true. I mean, there's just so much waste in that process, and mm-hmm. to your point, yes, you're scaling, but is it sustainable? And I think that's a big thing. Mm-hmm. It's hard to teach unless the foundation has been laid.
Yeah, and it's a thing of non-compromising. It really gets down to it. You think of how many, just in every area of society, whether it's from the world of politics, the world of business, the world of entertainment, like how many things bring so many people down. And they might not kill their careers, but many times it does. It kills families. There's so many ways to get caught in compromising situations, mm-hmm. and not even necessarily illegal or bad things, just things that, can kill a reputation or just not the best decisions, or, to use a poker term, kind of being on tilt because you got yourself in sort of a corner, yeah. and then you're doing survival mechanisms to keep the business afloat, yeah. and then you ultimately are destroying value or sucking value away from where it should be just to try to sustain your own situation,
Yeah, that's tough. So, one of the things that I love that you said early on is it's equally, if not more important, to figure out what you're not good at, mm-hmm. and that kind of guides you to what you're good at. So what along your career of, Wells Fargo and the banking and finance channel, like what along that career really opened your eyes to, man, I really like the grander scale of these things and understanding mm-hmm. the business practices behind them?
Part of it just came from the nature of being kind of a strange kid, in the sense that, and I don't go toward playing victim cards or labels of this or that, but from personality and just the way I grew up, I had little spectrum, relationships with, maybe Asperger's or just like obsessive compulsive. I mean, one of my favorite things to do as a kid was like lining up. I like to collect things and like line them up and like observe and look at and try to understand a whole category of things based on the component pieces. I mean, I was into sports because I like the statistics more than I actually like the drama of, the narratives of the games.
Sure.
So I had a mind for numbers. I would memorize baseball and basketball statistics. It just, without even trying, it just sort of was a byproduct.
That's right. You
evolved.
have the best memory of anyone I've ever met.
And it's not even necessarily a photographic memory. I think Jared, my partner, has more of a photographic memory for what that is. Mine's more just obsessive. I almost think of memory as like welding.
Yeah.
When you have enough passion and enough and it comes into contact with raw material information, it just welds it into place.
Yeah. And
you just have faith that you can go back and bring it up later when you need to.
Yeah.
And it's just an interesting concept.
That's very interesting. and so what about, those grander scales, your phenomenal memory, how did those principles and MaxPro, the idea behind MaxPro, and when Jared, as you alluded to, Jared Bradshaw, your co-founder, the other co-founder of MaxPro, what about that opportunity and really what he was trying to build and your skills and what you were finding that you loved, what really connected the two of those? Right.
So in true puzzle format or form, what I'm really lacking in is the sort of stick-to-itiveness or the ability to really go super deep in one specific area. Because I'm always sort of running to the outskirts to look at the big picture, running to the heights to look down and see where everything
That's a great way to
comes
put it.
together. And it's like the telescope view, right?
Yeah.
And he's the microscope, he's the artisan, the microscope view, let's look intricately and down into the very depths of this issue, problem, area, and let's solve it and let's figure out how things work, inside the machine.
Yeah.
And so he'd already built a successful insurance business at the time. Yeah. He came up through Farmers and developed a Farmers agency and sold that when he sort of made the decision that he wanted to go a little bit more independent and focus more on business. Because Farmers has a lot of great platforms for many things, but they're limited on what you can do with larger businesses and so on and so forth. So as he moved in that direction, he sort of shaped his business to after what he was going after and what he was finding he could bring in.
Yeah.
There was a little more unique in the market. There's a lot more competition in the personal lines and the small business policies, and he wanted to go more toward the workers' comp and some of the larger opportunities.
Absolutely. And so he has this expertise in this field and awareness of all property casualty and says, I can solve this problem really well. And you're talking to him and you're like, I can help you repeat solving that problem really well.
Absolutely. And to add a little bit more color, I guess, to Jared's process, he treats it kind of like a lawyer. A really good lawyer is smart, but they don't memorize everything. They have great resources, great libraries. They know how to find information. They know how to look things up. And they know enough about enough things to know how to actually find information, because Google and everything else makes finding information really good. It doesn't necessarily make finding good information really easy.
Yes.
It just makes finding something.
Yeah.
And that's where you've gotten this whole world of finding a lot of misinformation or just bad information really easy.
Don't get started.
Yeah, no. So you have to have something that is a filter. And he has a really good filter when it comes to that, because he knows a lot about the basic components of what makes a good policy and what people need and the landscape and all that stuff that's not my strength.
Absolutely. Okay. So, and we'll circle back, because I do love how much you and Jared really know about that niche space that you serve. And I think that's helpful for some of our listeners that own a business. But I think perhaps more broadly focused at anyone who either runs a business or a sole proprietor, if you will, from a system standpoint. Like, one of the systems that you've told me about a couple times, this is as you've been building it, which I just think is phenomenal, is actually your sales system, right? So how do we find the person that we can help? How do we communicate that we can help them to the point that they'll trust us?
Yep.
And then how do we actually follow through and over deliver in helping them?
For sure.
You've built out this phenomenal system where, as I said in the beginning, you're in the freaking trenches. Just like, I don't know if it's a manpower thing just as much as you just want to know how it's working and what you need to refine, continually going forward. So talk to me a little bit about like how you even started to look at this problem of how do we repeat this thing?
Sure. So the background of that, in a sense, is that when I was figuring out what I can really contribute to the business, because when there was just two of us at the beginning, and Jared was showing me all the paperwork, all the ways to do policies and all that, really was just not my strong suit compared to him. I mean, he could be more efficient in doing a lot of this stuff. And so initially I'm like, I'm a dreamer. I'm kind of the scope person. For us to decide to come together was already based on the fact that I could help him scale, become much bigger.
Yeah.
But that's not going to happen by making me try to be a poorer version of him. Yeah. Because that would just get you to 1.5 times maybe.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
And added some frustration, learning curve and all that to it.
Yeah.
So first of all, it was how do we build a better ecosystem for you kind of as a loan agent where I can be providing sort of resources and I can focus more on the sales side. Because that's the thing I can do. You can do sales. You don't necessarily have to be when you're in high-level sales, you need to know about products, but to a certain degree, you're not doing the really deep underwriting, or you don't have to be the deepest knowledge base or expert to sell, because the client is not going to want to know that much or doesn't know that much.
Exactly.
They know enough to have a good conversation about what's good for them, and that's essentially how deep you got to go.
Yep.
And so I immediately sort of went into the business development sales role. And he focused on I can bring a bunch in and you can close it, you can get it done, and you have that part dialed in, right?
Right.
And then as we build a bigger team, we brought in another operations person. And they together have been pretty good at building their system. I've lended some contributing aspects to the operations side of the sort of systems. And that's a little bit easier in the sense that there's sort of software and there's just different things that already exist that they've utilized. But then thanks to you introduced us to our actual fourth person.
Good old Carlos.
Person number 4, Carlos, who's been fantastic. But what he's also great at is, I have to give some credit to him as well, because Carlos is good at someone giving him a vision and him helping figure out how the pieces come together, how to actually execute on that. So we've sort of figured out the execution of the model together. Yeah. And what that model consists of is, again, right when we hired him, COVID basically hit. Yeah. So what it really consists of has been pretty much phone. We're not a phone broker by nature or by, how we handle clients, but it's been what we've been primarily able and allowed to do.
It's crazy.
So obviously when you first reach out, cold calling is both very inefficient and very efficient. It's inefficient because you have to go through a whole lot to get anything, but it's efficient because you can do all that pretty quickly.
Yep.
So it really comes down to really being in the trenches and making that process. So we've developed a system, and this is sort of the proprietary aspect I can't really talk too much about, but it's like we've built a really good lead generation system where I collect, and it is manual work, a lot of it. A lot of it isn't. I collect from a number of different places and put together a qualified list that's exactly the type of companies within a range, from size to complexity to the type of insurance. The window we're primarily calling for is workers' comp. That's usually the first thing we're looking to solve, and then we cross-sell once they're a client. We can talk about the rest of their lines, since we do all lines of commercial. Because workers' comp, there's a lot more public information about when their policy expires, when is a good buying window.
Right.
Because the other ways you make investigative calls is, hey, I want to introduce myself, love to have a conversation with you if you're not completely tied to an existing broker. When do you have something coming up? When's a relevant time to talk to you?
Right.
And so it's a little bit easier to go in with enough information to say, hey, I know you're in a buying window. Are you open-minded right now to, having us take a look at your insurance? This is why I believe we're qualified. We'd love to help. Are you open?
Yeah.
And you just do that a bunch of times, you're going to get You got to get a certain number. We've been making at least 200 calls a week for over 20 weeks, like almost 4 months now, I think.
This is the crazy part to me. This is where the scale comes in. So 200 a week for how long?
Yeah, I kind of stopped keeping track like a month ago. We were at 18, 19, 20. We're at least 20.
Wow.
Cool. We started, we could figure it out, but it's March, April, halfway through May. So it's halfway through May. So all of June, July, August, September, and October. So that's 24.
And you have
22 weeks.
Thorough notes on every single one of these encounters.
Well, pretty thorough. I mean, so we say who we talk to, we say what they're, what they expressed. Like you come across someone who's had their broker for 30 years.
Yeah.
We're not trying to, we're not trying to break down the door.
Right.
We respect that.
Yep.
Or if they have a great relationship, they think they're being well taken care of. But then we'll ask, okay, that's great. That's ultimately what we're trying to solve. So if that's already solved, are you open-minded though to us probably calling back next week, or next year, to check in and see where things are at. And we'll keep on.
You open to talking tomorrow?
Yeah, I'll call back. So it, we get permission and we can sort of like build that. They realize they're getting a lot of calls about not only this, but a lot of other things. So we want to come with that posture that we're not breaking down the door. We do have value to add, but we want to meet you on your terms. Because here's the other thing too. It's not about your pitch. People they don't care what you have to say. Right. They care what you can do. And the only way to ever show what you can do is for them to give you a chance to do it.
Right.
So what you say in the call isn't really all that important. Wow. There's a lot of things you can say that are wrong, or there's more ways you can get in your own way.
Yep.
But it's really hard to make a call go really well as opposed to poorly based on just what your opening script is. It only comes from engaging the client because you caught them at the right time and opening up sort of a conversation where they can express some concern or issue or something that's been nagging, and you can give them a little hope and then say, hey, the only way for us to deliver on that hope is to actually move forward and give us a chance to show you what we can do.
Exactly.
And that's ultimately what you're trying to do.
That's crazy. And so what do you think MaxPro looks like 4 or 5 years from now?
In what way?
in the number of people that you have internally on the team?
Well, I have more of a 30-year plan.
A 30-year plan?
Well, yeah, and actually
I'm going to be retired by then, so let's...
Ultimately, so here's the thing. The real reason we exist and we're doing what we're doing is because we're in an industry that has a lot of challenges. There's a lot, and I'll say this right up front, there's a lot of good brokers. We know a lot of good brokers. And there's a lot of people that are doing the best they can, but they're in models or platforms that don't really allow them to deliver, just like my own experience in financial services. So I'm very aware of that situation. I wasn't a bad guy. I just was a little bit handcuffed or limited in what I could do.
And you didn't know any better.
And I didn't know any better. And when I started to know better, I started to try to improve on that.
Yeah.
And so ultimately, we're looking to build a platform that really sits in that middle market. The Aons and the Gallaghers and the Hubs and the really big firms don't, I believe, in my opinion, humble opinion, provide as solid of a platform as could be if they really wanted to own and master the middle market. The middle market's a little bit of a subjective term, but pretty much anything from 10, 20 employees to maybe 1,000. Yeah. But definitely the hundreds, the whole mid-hundreds range, certainly under 100, the 50s, 40s in terms of people in a company.
Right.
Also the higher risk, like having the knowledge to really go deep when you have clients that are paying really high rates because, first of all, they're in a really difficult industry where people can die as opposed to getting a paper cut at work.
Yeah.
Or where they're just in a geography that's challenging, which is California. Right. So we got both of those with pretty much everyone we're going after. And then also maybe there's fluke because we're also in a state and just an environment that's typically litigious and is very employee friendly as opposed to business owner friendly. There's a lot of just fraudulent and bad claims that still become expensive. They still suck time. They still suck energy, regardless of the merits of the claim.
And what kind of claims are we talking about here?
Well, I mean, we've seen all kinds, down to we have a roofer, which is, we don't actually do a lot of roofers because it's a really tough space, and a lot of them are just served by state fund.
Right.
Just because unless they're really big, it's tough to compete. But we have a roofer, for instance, that was working on a job site, and they had someone walking by who happened to be an illegal alien as far as work. But he claimed that he got cut, like a hand cut or something, from working on the job site. He just saw it and happened to see the job site and then kind of moved on. But that claim was actually, they accepted the claim. Wow. And he ended up going back to Mexico. I don't know whether he had to or whether he chose to, but he kept getting paid back in Mexico. So it's like he got all this money just for making up this bogus claim that goes against and obviously the point of the insurance is that person's not paying out of pocket. Right. But they pay out of pocket later because now they have a claim against their insurance, and so their rates are going to go up. The reserves they have to keep in their policy goes up. So, and this is sort of systemic. You multiply that times thousands, and then so California has much higher rates in workers' comp insurance because of not only that, but that's a big part of it. Wow. Bad claims. And the carriers try to crack down on it, but it's like whack-a-mole. There's only so much infrastructure you can do to run a profitable business. You can't hire, half of your company just being people investigating claims and making sure that they're legit.
Exactly. So. And I mean, even on the legitimate claims, it's hard enough to get any background details from the insured or from the employer, and as a carrier, it can be difficult.
Yeah, so a good broker will take some of the heavy lifting. We'll do a lot of the work to support the client. And at the end of the day, a good broker is sort of like a good defense attorney in the fact that you're not just blindly trying to serve your client. Yeah. You're ultimately trying to serve truth. Yeah. And if the client does something that they shouldn't have done, you want to help them understand that, but you're not just going to blindly help your client because it's an income stream for you. It's like, no, you got to do the right thing. Absolutely. And so you don't want to enable clients to do things the wrong way, whether it comes to taxes, whether it comes to, licenses, whether it comes to employee practices, any of that, because you don't want to be liable to be part of that ecosystem. Absolutely. Out of your client base, how have you found these businesses being impacted by COVID? Well, so by the nature of our business being a higher risk focused on primarily contractors, we do a fair amount, contractors, manufacturers, your typical world of higher risk insurance, business insurance, some cannabis. We have knowledge about how to work that market or understand that market as well. Yeah. And then transportation and logistics, like truckers. Yeah. So trucking's been a little bit tougher, but that was already kind of a result of AB5. Yeah. But then COVID on top of it made it difficult for your individual trucker that owns a truck to maybe have consistent jobs. Right. So freight's been really hit. But that is sort of a recent development because we actually joined with the Western States Trucking Association. Okay. And we're now their broker. Wow. So we basically work with their existing clients, and then they're also feeding us people that go to them inquiring about insurance. Sure. As an association. So when COVID hit, we didn't really focus as much on that segment, but most of our people were contractors. Yep. And as you're aware, that was primarily a essential business. Yep. And it didn't really decline too much. Our worst hit client was a janitorial, cleaning service for restaurants, which you can imagine is real hard. Yeah. So he lost I think $700,000 a month in revenue at the time, and had to sort of get small real fast and just kind of hang on, and then was able to gradually get back into not where he was, but enough to sustain his overhead and stuff. Sure. Yeah. Contractors, I feel have been extremely busy. Yeah. I mean, that's one of those things. People need shelter. People, life has to keep on going as best it can. And they're already wearing masks and protective equipment. I mean, that's kind of their world anyways. So it's not necessarily a different environment for them when they're on the job doing most things. They're not around people. You're not in an office where you have 50 people breathing the same air. They're primarily outdoors. So it lends itself much more favorably toward navigating the COVID environment. Sure.
absolutely. Well, we're at 28 minutes already,
Cool.
which I cannot believe. So, and I know we have to get you out of here because you got a hard stop. So, it's a perfect opportunity to ask you 2 last questions.
Okay.
One, how many kids do you have?
Now 4.
4.
Recently.
I knew that, but I just wanted you to say, because you became a parent of 4 rather recently.
Yep.
And it's an interesting story. Before we get to that fun story,
okay,
because I still have yet to hear the full thing of how this all happened. But how do you manage a growing business? You're not just running a business. You are growing it, and along with this growing family. Like, what is that balance like? How do you manage the two?
So managing 4 kids and managing that scenario are both of the same cloth, I guess.
Yeah.
Jim Gaffigan, the comedian, was asked, he has 4 kids, like what it was like to have 4 kids. It's like, imagine you're in a pool drowning and someone throws you a baby. It's like you're already there at 3, and then 4 doesn't really, add too much more in a way. Yeah. Because by then you're hopefully kind of used to it, or you've gotten somewhat capable. Yeah, absolutely. But with the business, there's a certain opportunistic nature of how to grow a business, and sort of an amount of whimsy. You want to plan, but you also want to not plan too hard. You want to plan long and then be nimble as you go. And what ends up happening, what you sacrifice as you get really big, is the sort of nimbleness to be opportunistic, because you're kind of get more rigid as you build the systems infrastructure that sort of holds people in their place. Yep. So that's going to be a fun and interesting challenge to overcome is when we get there. Yep. And obviously I've read lots of books about people's approach to management and this and that. And so I think that can be certainly solved in a positive way. But yeah, I think you got to take care of yourself. Mm-hmm. You can't let stress, fear, any of those things really overcome. A lot of people are really into exercise to help. I do, but I get a lot of exercise with the kids. So I like walks. And I used to be a runner back in the day competitively. But with running, you can't really think as much and like take notes. And so sometimes what I'll do is I'll start running. Yeah. And then when too much comes to my mind, because typically when the blood flows, I start thinking about a lot of stuff, I'll actually just stop and walk briskly, and I'll start like typing in my phone. Yeah. Or I'll just like listen to music or something, or let thoughts sort of come and then capture them as I go. That's sort of what works well for me. That. So I do a lot of walking. Yeah. And then I went back to keto. I did it a while back. With COVID, I did add the COVID weight, and I actually went above 200 pounds the first time. Wow. And now I'm back to 195. I think I went at 202 as the most. I've lost 7 pounds. Nice. And it's not permanently sustainable, but it works well for me because carbs blow me out. Carbs are not good for me.
Well, and so you had pregnancy weight, which is a dad thing,
whether psychological or otherwise,
and the COVID-19. Yeah. So you had those two together.
So in other words, the summary of that's taking care of yourself, and then allowing yourself to continue to be a visionary. They say adults, one of the things that unfortunately separates kids from adults is adults get too realistic. They stop dreaming. They stop having big dreams. Yep. And almost no one dreams big enough. If you really look at what people believe they can do, almost no one believes that they can do the stuff that they actually could do. So being a big dreamer and not putting like caps and limits on, but going for really big things. Yeah. You have to do that because it's going to motivate what you're doing the next, minute, hour, day, and on.
Absolutely. And you can't be the only one with those big dreams. You have to build the team around.
We have to build like a mastermind, as Napoleon Hill talks about. You have to build sort of that mastermind of people that sort of inhabit the same brain space and can be kind of thinking toward. I do believe in the power of thoughts very strongly, and in the power of you create your own, prophetic, real self-fulfilling prophecies, whether good or bad. Yep. I think thinking that's why people can go from heights downward by thinking very negatively as well.
Yes, I completely agree. All right, we're going to have to cut it there. But we couldn't have cut that at a better spot. And sorry, we're both just looking at the clock because we got a hard stop in front of us.
We have time for just a quick 2-minute rendition of the story if you want.
Yes.
Okay.
All right. So. Great news. So we have to hear this. As Christian mentioned, just blessed with their 4th child. But it was a rather interesting story of meeting that 4th child for the first time.
Yeah. So the interesting thing about having a 4th child is that my wife has typically had challenging pregnancies, very difficult, and then also just long, laborsome deliveries. Yep. They call it labor for a reason. So long story short, she waited a little bit long to decide to, hey, get in the car, we got to go. So I think by the time we got in the car, she was already at like a minute and a half between contractions. So
cutting it close.
So we were going, and our hospital, because she works at Cedars-Sinai, is Cedars-Sinai. It's about a 45-minute drive away from where I live. So we jump on the freeway, and her water breaks as I'm passing 2 semis. This is 4:40 in the morning on the 5th.
Oh my gosh.
So not quite, almost about a month ago, just about a month ago. And I was like, okay. And she's already like kneeling, like sitting, like kneeling on the floor. She couldn't sit at that point. It was too uncomfortable. So I'm like, all right, the next exit is McBean. We're going to Henry Mayo. There's no way we're going to make it. Right. It doesn't make sense to try. So I got up on the freeway, the overpass on McBean. And I turned left, got halfway across the bridge, and I heard crying. The baby literally was delivered on the floor of the car. So I came to a stop. I reached down to pick up the baby and realized I was still rolling because I forgot to put it in park because I'm like just reacting. So I stopped, put it in park, get the baby, call 911. And then the people from the firemen from 124 in Stevenson Ranch were fantastic. So I give major props to them. But they came within 5 minutes, kind of helped us with the rest, cut the cord, stabilize the situation. But it was, reaching down, picking up a baby when, I've seen babies delivered. At least it wasn't my first time, but that's a first. Dealing with that. This is my lucky shirt. So this is the shirt that the baby, was covered with the baby.
This is too cool. This is too cool.
So it was in this shirt. It was in the car. And that's my most exciting delivery
And
story.
So now it's your lucky shirt. Lucky shirt. Don't ever sell that car. Don't
ever sell the shirt.
Yeah, exactly. That is so crazy, man. To keep your composure through all of that. And your wife, what a trooper.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
She's amazing. Yeah.
Incredible story. When I heard that, I'm so glad you told me. Once you told me it was delivered and then told me the exact story, I was like, that is insane. So the world had to hear that. It's possible. Christian Moore, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Robert.
And how can our listeners find you and find the team at MaxPro?
Yep. So we have a website, maxproinsurance.com. And from there we have the other contact information and such. We do have a Facebook page. I think we have an Instagram page. I'm not really the best at the social media side, but we have put, I think, pretty much all the major ones. LinkedIn, there's a LinkedIn page as well.
I love that.
To this point, most of our clients come from direct outreach, not so much the advertising. So we plan to beef up our presence at some point, but there's only so much time in a day.
You're focused on the right things too, which is serving the clients and not trying to market yourself as some fantastic thing, but word of mouth and doing right by client. I love it. Well, thank you so much, and hope to have you back on another episode.
I'd love to. Thank you, Robert.
Securities and investment advisory services offered through Next Financial Group, Inc., member FINRA SIPC. Prosperitas Financial is not an affiliate of Next Financial Group, Inc. This material is not intended as an offer or solicitation for the purchase of sale of any security or other financial instrument. Past performance does not guarantee future performance. All the views expressed are those of Robert Clark and Prosperitas Financial and not of those of Next Financial Group, Inc. Next does not offer tax or legal advice. The S&P 500 is a market cap weighted index composed of common stocks of 500 leading companies in the leading industries of the U.S. economy. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is a price weighted index of 30 actively traded blue chip stocks.